T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have...
From its first flight in 1981 till its final landing in 2011, the Space Shuttle was the backbone of the American space program. Built upon the experience gained from Apollo, and with the goal of making a reusable spacecraft, NASA accomplished a feat that most thought was impossible. 5 complete shuttle systems were built and completed 135 missions to low Earth orbit. They conducted science experiments, deployed and fixed the Hubble Space Telescope, and helped to build the International Space Station, which is in healthy operation still. Using Kerbal Space Program, we'll take a deep dive into each mission, looking at the crew, payload, and mission objectives. Join us on this walk through history. And hey, you just might learn something. I'm Sears JT, and this is Project STS. STS-6, first flight of Space Shuttle Challenger. So, as I put earlier, a new Challenger enters the fray of the Space Shuttle program. Bad joke, I know. This was launched on April 4th, 1983 at 6:30 p.m. or 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 5 months after STS-5, although the turnaround time doesn't really matter in this case because it's a new orbiter. The crew for this mission, another crew of 4 is Commander Paul J. Weitz, pilot Carol J. Bobko, which is a fantastic name, by the way. Where are you, Carol? You are. With 2 mission specialists, F. Story Musgrave, also a really cool name. We'll talk about Musgrave later as well. He'll come up in another mission. I think he comes up during STS-8. Actually, I don't remember. He comes up soon. I've seen that name come up again. And Donald Peterson as the other mission specialist. Donald Peterson. Okay. So here, we've got the satellite, got the payload. Let's pack it in and roll her out to the pad. STS-6, let's go. So while we're rolling this out, there's actually a lot that happens before this thing even leaves the ground. So like I said, it launches on April 4th. The original launch date was January 20th, a full, what is that, 3 months? February, March, April. Okay, 3 months. 3 months before, or it actually did launch. And the problem was, it was delayed initially 74 days due to a hydrogen leak in SSME-1, which is, I believe, this one. There was a hydrogen leak in the cabin behind it, which later they found out was from a cracked fuel line. So they figured that out. Well, they didn't really figure out okay, let me back up. They do what's called flight readiness firing, which you can kind of think of like SpaceX's static fires. They kind of test the engines, make sure they're all good on the shuttle before launch. And during the first flight readiness firing, or FRF, there was a leak of hydrogen. It was in one of the cabins due to a cracked fuel line of SSME-1. So upon finding that leak, they did... I'm trying to remember what the exact order of events here was. I know they did a second FRF. They did a second one to confirm that, okay, yes, there's actually a crack in one of the fuel lines. Once they figured that out during the second FRF, they took all 3 engines off the orbiter while it was on the pad. I believe it's still on the pad. I'm being really sketchy with you guys right now, and I probably should have taken better notes on this, but they took all 3 engines off, fixed the one. They also found issues with the other 2, which was a real good start to this orbiter's first mission, but they took them all off to repair the cracks in the fuel lines. 2 and 3 were reinstalled, but they tested the repairs on SSME-1, found out that they're not going to work, so they had to get a brand new engine from Rocketdyne to put on the orbiter for SSME-1. So that delayed it even a little bit further, which 74 days, so that's 2 months. So they delayed it another month to get that new engine from Rocketdyne. So during this whole thing, of it sitting on the pad, taking off the engines, putting the new engines on, testing it, all this kind of stuff, the satellite got contaminated while it was sitting in the payload bay. So along with them replacing engines, fixing fuel leaks, they had to take the satellite out of the payload bay, run its checks, make sure nothing was broken or contaminated on the satellite, and then put it back in the payload bay. So this is why the original launch date was January 20th, and it launched on April 4th. It took forever. Oh, alongside that, there was also a storm in there, to make things better. Which actually, that's why they wanted to check the contamination on the satellite, because there was a freaking thunderstorm. Which, who knew? Florida? There's a thunderstorm in a 3-month period? Weird. But, so a lot happened with Challenger on its first flight prior to even it leaving the pad. That also goes to show that SSMEs were, they're freaking ballin' engines, but they broke just like any other rocket engines. Which, when I read that they took the engines off the orbiter on the pad, and once we get into STS 8, I believe, yeah, STS 8, like STS 8 was stood a freaking hurricane while it was on the pad. So to think that they kept it on the pad, they took the engines off, tested them, put them back on, tested the satellite, all this kind of stuff, on top of withstanding a storm. And the thing still did its mission. It's crazy. Maiden flight of STS-6, the Space Shuttle Challenger, lifting off in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, liftoff. Challenger has left the tower. Or cleared the tower. Go for roll. Roger, roll. Wow, the difference in this one feels incredibly lighter. Wow, the difference in payloads, which I'm surprised this one it would consider it lighter. Looking good, Challenger. Grab this SSME while I'm thinking about it. Okay. Coming up in SRB sub. Gauging roll. SRB sub. Confirm. Main engine cutoff. Roll over. I'll open the rest of them. Activate OMS. Alright, go for... Good thing I checked this. We almost separated the payload again. F5, just in case. ET sep. Roger, ET sep. So, I forgot to talk about the crew while we're going up. So, Commander Paul G. Weitz, pilot Kerbal Bobko, specialist F-Story Musgrave, and mission specialist Peterson. Alright, Paul G. Weitz, a part of astronaut group 5, which, with Brand, who flew in STS-5, who we just saw, and Engel with STS-2, Fred Hayes. So, that same group. We've been over that same astronaut group. He was the pilot for the crew of Skylab 2, so he's been to space already. And he retired from NASA in '76 before coming back to fly on the maiden flight of Challenger. So he was actually retired, and NASA brought him back to fly this shuttle's first flight, which I'm sure that didn't take much convincing, let's be honest. Kerbal Bobko, he was part of SMEAT, which we've talked about before. It was the Skylab Medical Experiment Altitude Test. He did that test with Crippen, who flew on STS-1. But it was on the ground, but it's in a hyperbolic chamber to test like Skylab, if people could live in Skylab, essentially. what systems would have to work, what things would have to change for Skylab if people had to live there for an extended period of time. He was on the astronaut support crew for Apollo's Soyuz, a Capcom and chase pilot for the ALTs, lead astronaut and test Checo group for STS-1. So he was up close and personal with Columbia during its rollout for its first launch. And he would go on to also fly on future missions, so we'll see his name again. Musgrave, MS-1, he was part of astronaut group 6, which there's a lot of names from that group also that we'll see in the future. So a lot of these early missions, either the support crew or the astronauts, they're flying for space for the first time, but them and their classmates in the same group fly on tons of shuttle missions. So I'm going to go through his specialty, and I wonder if you guys can discern what this mission was about. He helped work and design and develop the Skylab program, but he also helped design and develop the EVA equipment. So like suits, life support, EMUs, airlocks, egress and ingress, all the stuff related to EVAs, he helped develop. He was the backup science group for Skylab 2, just because of his specialty in EVAs. Capcom for the second and third Skylab missions, and STS 31, 35, 36, 41. And he would also fly on future shuttles. So this guy did stuff. And he was, so cool factoid if you're on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and you get asked this question. He's the only astronaut to fly in all 5 shuttles. So Columbia, Challenger, Atlantis, Discovery, and Endurance. He flew on all 5, so we'll see Musgrave pop up again. Oop. I missed my... I'll just let MechJeb do it. Atlantis, sorry. Yeah. Not Endurance. Yeah. I was thinking Mars 2020. And Endurance is yours, yeah. Sorry. Atlantis, my bad. I want to forget about Space Shuttle Atlantis for sure. Right, the Space Shuttle Enterprise? That, Babco flew on Enterprise. Enterprise doesn't really count. It never went to space. And then, last but not least, is Donald Peterson. There's not as much cool stuff about him. He was the support crew for Apollo 16. He retired from the Air Force before joining NASA, or I think he retired from the Air Force about the same time he joined NASA, but then he worked with NASA as a civilian instead of actually being a member of the military. And then his areas of specialty are engineering, support, and man-machine interfaces and safety assessment. So, combined with Musgrave, whose specialty is EVAs, okay, the shuttle's just going to freak out. You can kind of tell they were really pushing for EVA on this mission. Calm down, shuttle. That's what happens when I let MechJeb do the circularization. And then I'll just go through the support crew pretty quickly. As again, all of these names will pop up later. Roy Bridges, entry Capcom. Richard Convey, Ascent Capcom. And then Mary Cleve, Guy Gardner. I like that name. John McBride and Brian O'Connor. All were part of support crews. We will see those names later, so I won't go too far into those. Okay, so we're in orbit. Let's pop open the payload bay. There's a lot of names that were part of the STS program. A lot of names. And it's kind of hard to keep track. But I think as the missions go on, you start to see the same names pop up over and over again because a lot of them flew multiple missions. Actually, most of them flew multiple missions. I don't know if John Young did. But a majority of the crew from Crippen on STS-1 through all the way to the end flew multiple shuttle missions. So we'll see a repeat of names for sure. One more thing about the crew of this mission. everybody made fun of them, and they actually talk about this in the post-mission press conference, that everybody called them the Geritol Bunch. They have a combined flight experience of 111 years between the four of them, and then on top of that, they were the oldest average age of a crew to fly in the space shuttle at 48 years old, which you would think would be higher. So we have a single payload on STS-6, which, if a maiden flight of Challenger, might as well give it a pretty straightforward mission, which was to deploy this TDRS satellite, which, like with Starliner, the launch recently, they had a problem with TDRS communication. That's these satellites. I don't know if they used this specific one. I think this one was decommissioned before. Actually, I think it was decommissioned at some point, not that long ago. But that's this communication satellite that they used for spacecraft going around the planet to help bounce off ground stations, stuff like that. It was connected to an IUS, which is this tank right here, an engine. Actually, it's two-stage. There's a second engine in here. IUS, or initial upper stage. One's for one's the perigee motor to raise its apogee, and then the next one is the apogee motor to obviously raise its perigee. And these teeter satellites are in geosync, so they're not around the equator, but they're inclined. I believe a lot of them are inclined at the 23.5-ish, between 28 and 23 degree inclination, because that's where most spacecraft go. Other than that, there's nothing else really before deployment that I need to talk about. So let's get the satellite out of the shuttle bay. I will say, if you look up STS-6 and its payload, it'll look a lot different than this. Only because with KSP, I couldn't figure out a good way to do the actual turning mechanism. At least not before I was going to do this mission. But instead of being hooked up at the back of the payload bay like it is here, there's that ring that went around it, about the middle of the tank, that would rotate it up, and then it would disconnect and be pushed out. I just have it connected to the back because that was kind of the most easiest and straightforward thing to do. The real shuttle did not do that because that would not have worked in an IRL scenario. But other than that, I think we can go ahead and deploy the satellite. Let's get this out of this payload bay, and then we'll talk about the satellite itself once it's out of here, because some stuff happened to this thing after it left Challenger. So, it's an African language. Oh, I see. Let me check action groups, because I believe I did bind this to an action group, but 6? No, okay. I'll bind it to 6. It's weird. Yeah. Let's watch this from the crew cabin. This is probably my favorite deployment over the ComSats. Okay. Deploying teeter set 5. Well, actually, it doesn't matter. I don't need to be pointing a specific direction for this one, because it has in real life, this thing had its own attitude thrusters and all that kind of stuff, so it could point the direction it needed to. The spin stabilized ComSats did not have that, so that you had to point it in the right direction prior to deployment. Alright, we found the anomaly, Houston. We are ready to deploy the set. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, it's going a little fast, but yeah, that satellite folds up really awkwardly, and trying to recreate that in KSP was a little difficult. So the satellite has reached optimal angle. Get ready for decouple and push. Roger. I gave this thing a full minute on the Cal controller before it, just so it stopped wobbling back and forth before it pushed off. Anytime now. There it goes. That's so cool. That's so freaking cool. And that happened, that almost happened, well, it's pretty close to what happened in real life. It's just nuts, man. Satellite deployment confirmed. We are going to boost away from the satellite a little bit. I'm going to switch to the satellite. IUS engine activated. Actually, I think they waited a good amount of time before. Engine's activated. Electric charge looks good. Locking ASS. Let's go to prograde. Get ready to raise our orbit. Geosynchronous. Was it 228? I guess I can target one of these and look. 2897, 2828. How about there? All right. So while we're raising this thing's orbit, I'll talk about. So this thing weighed 5,000 pounds, or 2,300 kilos for you non-freedom unit people. The IUS, during its burn, actually tumbled out of control, and they cut it early and ended up placing it into a lower desired orbit, or a highly elliptical, lower than desired orbit. So it actually had attitude control thrusters on it, so it just used those over several months to finally get it to its proper orbit, which ended up saving this $100 million satellite, which is kind of smart. So it must not have fell out of control too bad if they were able to get it recovered with attitude control thrusters, but it still kind of stinks that they had to do it because it tumbled. Which it wasn't spin stabilized, so I don't know why it tumbled. I'll have to do more research on why it tumbled, but it did finally get it into a geosync orbit after several months. And I'm going to turn several months into. I'm just going to do it now. Let me get these organized correctly. I didn't check staging on this because I knew I'd probably have to do it in orbit. So, all right. So we're decoupling perigee motor. And there's no way to rename this, is there? I don't know what the core. I'm gonna put a probe core on that. And then once we get this thing in orbit, I will unfurl it and we'll have our first TDRS satellite in geosynchronous orbit. Okay. We're raising our periapsis. Oh, God. Although, I will say, I'm quite proud of myself on the way the satellite unfurls with the Cal controller. It does look kind of cool. Okay, we have reached geosync. I wasn't going to do a several month long thing, so. Satellite deployment confirmed. I'll stand by sound for all. Let me get the cow controller. I mean, I think it looks kind of cool, but I mean, Snackless, you're gonna laugh at it probably. All right. Before I do, hang on. Just want to make sure I unlock everything. I know I locked everything for Ascent. So I just want to double check. It must have unlocked everything on its own. Okay. Oh, it goes a lot faster than I thought it would. Okay. It shouldn't have gone that fast, but that was kind of cool. Radial in. Out, I mean. Dude, the SAS on this is way too high. Control from here. Okay, that's why. Radial in. Alright, TDRS 1. Deployed. Even though, yeah, I know these don't really point correctly, but they'll be fine. Kind of want to see it again. So when talking about the crew, I mentioned how heavily specialized the two mission specialists were in EVA, equipment, and processes and all this. Obviously, they wanted to actually do the EVA on this mission, which they successfully did. Alright, Snackless. See you, man. Get up, go to bed. So Musgrave and Peterson, the two mission specialists, did a 4-hour EVA, which I think I'll try and attempt. They had to do a 3-hour pre-breathe about pure oxygen, which on an EVA, that's pretty standard procedure, in order to avoid the bends of the suit pressure being lower than normal atmosphere. Excuse me. So, I need to get them. Oh, this one is not. I can put them to mid deck, but I don't have. So, let's get Musgrave out here. Why are you? He's not rotating like he would. Oh, wrong one. Oh, okay. So in the actual EVA with Musgrave and Peterson, they actually didn't detach. They were fully tethered the entire time. But really, during that 4-hour EVA, doing. All they wanted to test was, like, can they work on EVA? Can they use the tools they were given on EVA? And they went up and down the payload bay, testing like tether systems, like everything. Anything they could test in an EVA, they tried. Let's see what else. They wanted to see if they could do construction, repair work in orbit, which we know will come in handy later. We'll see if very good. All right, see you, Fatal. Get out of here. Go to sleep. Safety tethers, tools, wrenches. Like basic ability, can you do work while on EVA with these suits? Which I think they proved. They were out there for 4 hours. Everything worked flawlessly. They did mobility tests. One thing, who was it? There was a quote. I have the quote, but I didn't write who it was. It was Paul. Since he was watching them from the back windows, he's like, the back of the shuttle is roughly 65 feet away. And when you see these two guys down there with the Earth behind them, going by underneath, he was talking about how crazy it looks and how it looks more Star Warsy than Star Wars. Right, because you got these two guys in space at the back of an orbiter that has a tail and wings, and you're in orbit with the Earth like speeding by below you. And like, I'm sure that was a really cool sight to see. See, what else? Is there anything else about the EVA? I don't think there is. I mean, they performed the EVA without problems. Because with the STS-5, there are obviously all those suit issues, but they got them fixed on STS-6, and everything performed flawlessly. And get Musgrave and Peterson back in. I do wish that KSP had tethers and stuff for EVA, so you can like guide them. There's kind of those handrails, but it's not the same. They didn't test fully detached EVA though. On a future mission, they will test untethered EMUs. But the purpose of these EVAs were solely just, can we do EVAs for one, and two, can we do work in space while on the EVA? And they, so yeah, 80 orbits, 2 million miles, and they got their satellite deployed. Well, let's get these guys home. Oh, one thing they did notice that they didn't really notice on other missions, which was interesting. During the EVA, they said the rudder of the tail was hard to the left. And like, why is the tail rudder hard to the left? Well, they found in the checkout process, I guess, when they get to orbit, that that process puts the rudder hard to the left for some reason. It's like, oh, I thought that was kind of a cool little tidbit. Enough of them to bring it up in the post-flight press conference. Okay, well, they noticed the rudder was hard to the left, and they saw why it was, and they guess that they fixed it in future missions, or maybe they left it. I'm not quite sure. So we're kind of at a good deorbit place right now, but I'm gonna wait probably another orbit. Well, we had a very good ascent, so we don't have to go hard in now. So while we're coming up on a maneuver node and we're dumping fuel, I talked about the Geotol bunch, of how this is an older crew. Traveled 80 orbits for a mission duration of 5 days. Sorry, I know it's zooming in and out. I'm scrolling through my notes here. Oh, I didn't talk about how they had... So there were 3 getaway special canisters in the payload bay as well. Plus the Latex Reactor and the CFE, which the CFE will come up later. So I left that to a later mission to talk about. The Latex Reactor was them seeing if growing latex in, or making latex in microgravity made it better. I didn't look up what the results of a lot of those experiments are, but I assume you get a better cell structure for latex if you make it in microgravity. So those were the 2 main experiments they had in the mid-deck, along with the getaway specials in the payload bay. I didn't really find much more science-wise that they did that was worth noting. Other than that, it was a pretty straightforward mission. Most because it was the orbiter's first mission, which makes sense, give it a simple mission. And you had that big satellite in the payload bay, so you can fit much more. Get our elevons ready for activation. And how much Delta V have we got left? I might burn off a little bit more. We have 238. Yeah, okay. Deactivate. Shut down gimbal. Shut down gimbal. Activate fuel dump. Gonna burn a little bit more. We're dead on. We're 32 kilometers up. Oh. $45. Trying to kill some velocity here. Why did it do that? That was weird. Lose that speed. Lose that speed. Hey, Grav Shark, what's going on, man? Alright. This is actually okay. This is very much okay. I like this. That was much better. We're high, but we can circle. We're killing off lots of speed too. We're good there. Alright, we're turning this off. I am taking over manual control. A minute. I mean, a little bit. A little bit. Don't go crazy with it. Okay, I'm gonna circle out. And we'll just do a big U-turn back into KSC. Oh god. We're still a little fast, so it's a little squirrely, but that's alright. Also, just don't tell him. Don't tell me what. Oh. That you're modding in Mass Effect 1 install? What mods are there? Oh. I mean, I've come to accept it at this point. I'm debating when I should make my turn. How far out? I'm at 220 meters per second. We're at 10 kilometers, probably now. Alright, this... I should be able to nail this. Might have went on a little too far, but I can make a coast in from here. Okay, I'm gonna move the mic. Sorry if it's loud. Challenger, you are looking good. I still have fuel left, which is crazy. Wouldn't think I'd have fuel left at this point. Speed's looking a little low. A bit of an awkward approach, Challenger, but you're in the pipe. Touchdown. A little bit hard, but... Oop, 9. 9 is the shoot. And party shuttle. Oh, no party shuttle. Contact. Ooh, alright. That's 2 for 2 on runways. That's 2 for 2. So that is STS-6. Let me see if there's anything else I forgot. Other than it landed at Edwards on runway 22, and it was shipped back to KSC 11 days later, which will be more important during STS-7, I believe. Let me double check that. Nope. I'm just reading my notes. No, just kidding. Because there was a short turnaround between two of these. Trying to figure out which ones it was. Oh, it was between 7 and 8. Okay. So there was actually a good turnaround between 6 and 7. But main flight of Challenger complete. Mission 6 was fully successful. No problems. All right.